I ate less than ever before, and my belly got bigger. That made no sense to me. I was counting every calorie, skipping meals, pushing harder, and my waist kept growing slowly. My doctor ran the labs and said everything looks completely normal and fine. But my body was telling a completely different story every single morning I woke up. That is when I discovered something that changed everything I thought I knew about belly fat. Your body is not storing fat because you eat too much. It is storing fat to survive. And the mechanism behind this has nothing to do with willpower or discipline at all. There is a hidden enzyme inside your fat tissue that your doctor has never tested for. This enzyme is quietly converting a harmless stored compound into active cortisol inside your belly fat. And that active cortisol is the reason your waist grows even when you eat almost nothing. Blood tests cannot catch this process because it happens at the tissue level, not in blood. You can have perfectly normal cortisol on paper while your fat cells are completely soaked inside. This is the disconnect that keeps millions of people stuck despite doing everything right on paper. So let me walk you through exactly what is happening inside your body right now today. Your body does not just produce cortisol and then switch it off cleanly after stress passes. It stores a massive reservoir of cortisol in a dormant, inactive form called cortisone constantly. Think of cortisone like cortisol with the batteries fully removed, present but completely harmless sitting there. It floats through your bloodstream all day long and does absolutely nothing harmful on its own. But the moment your body senses any kind of threat, that cortisone gets converted into active cortisol. And here is the part that most people and most doctors completely miss about this process. That conversion does not happen in your blood. It happens directly inside your fat cells and liver. So your blood test reads normal, but your belly fat is drowning in active cortisol silently. This entire process is controlled by one single enzyme called 11-beta-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase inside tissues. This enzyme is the switch that flips inactive cortisone into active cortisol on demand inside you. When this enzyme becomes overactive, your fat tissue turns into a cortisol-soaked fat storing machine. It increases something called lipoprotein lipase activity, specifically inside your deep visceral abdominal fat region, daily. That means your belly fat becomes extremely efficient at pulling in circulating fat and refusing release. At the same time, your liver starts ramping up glucose production through a process called gluconeogenesis. If you were sprinting across open land, that glucose would burn off immediately and completely fine. But most of us are sitting down, so that extra glucose just raises your insulin levels quietly. And here is where things get really serious for anyone struggling with stubborn belly fat today. Insulin and cortisol together are one of the most powerful drivers of visceral fat storage known. This combination creates that hard, firm belly that does not jiggle and cannot be grabbed easily. That is not soft subcutaneous fat. That is deep visceral fat sitting inside your abdominal cavity. Your waist-to-hip ratio starts climbing even when you are eating less than almost everyone else. You wake up multiple times at night for no clear reason and feel exhausted every morning. Your fasting glucose reads higher than expected, even though you have not eaten since the night before. And you are sitting there completely confused, because you are dieting harder than you ever have before. Now here is the paradox that will completely shift how you think about restriction and fat loss. Sometimes the stricter and cleaner you eat, the more aggressively this enzyme gets activated by your body. When you drop calories significantly, your body interprets that deficit as a real survival threat immediately. It does not know you are trying to look better or feel healthier in 3 months. It thinks you are starving. And when it thinks that it activates local cortisol hard and fast, the enzyme ramps up. Your fat tissue starts hoarding every single calorie it possibly can get. Sleep starts breaking down, and broken sleep further activates the enzyme which worsens your sleep again. It is one of the most frustrating and invisible cycles in all of metabolic health today. I know this cycle personally because I lived inside it for a long and painful stretch of time. I was overweight for years, then finally started losing fat and genuinely thought I had it figured. But then I overcorrected and started eating less and less, thinking more restriction would speed things up. Instead, my sleep started falling apart, my mood dropped, and my waist measurement actually began creeping up. Not dramatically, but enough to notice and enough to feel genuinely alarming given how little I ate. It was visceral fat, not from overeating but from chronic undereating triggering local cortisol activation constantly. That experience completely rewired how I think about stress, fat, and what restriction actually does to bodies. Now let us talk about the one food that can directly target and inhibit this enzyme meaningfully. Dark chocolate, specifically high polyphenol dark chocolate, consumed at the right time, in the right amount daily. A published study in the journal Antioxidants looked directly at this question with real human participants involved. Participants consumed 25 grams of high polyphenol dark chocolate every single day for 4 straight weeks. That is less than 1 ounce, a small, manageable, and genuinely enjoyable daily dietary intervention with real science. Researchers measured cortisol patterns, cortisone levels, and critically the ratio between cortisol and cortisone each day. What they found pointed directly at the enzyme as the real mechanism of action involved here. Daily cortisol levels dropped. Morning cortisol dropped. But the most important finding was the ratio change. The cortisol to cortisone ratio dropped meaningfully, meaning less cortisone was being converted into active cortisol overall. That specific finding points directly at enzymatic inhibition, happening at the tissue level, not just mood elevation. The chocolate was not just helping people feel more relaxed, it was changing the actual biochemical conversion rate. Cocoa contains flavonoids called epicatechins and procyanidins that appear to directly downregulate this enzyme's expression. In vitro studies support this finding, and the human study results align perfectly with that predicted mechanism. This is not chocolate lifting your mood through serotonin, though it likely does that somewhat too. This is a targeted biochemical effect on the specific enzymatic pathway controlling cortisol activation in fat tissue. And that distinction matters enormously because it means the effect is real, measurable, and not placebo response. Now, dark chocolate is powerful in this context, but it is absolutely not the only lever available. Sleep is probably the single most important thing you can do to lower this enzyme's activity daily. Sleep deprivation directly upregulates cortisol activation enzymes in your liver and brain. That is established science. When you are not sleeping well, your body assumes you are under threat and ramps cortisol accordingly. So improving sleep quality is not just nice to have, it is a direct enzymatic intervention you control. Reducing inflammation throughout your body also helps significantly because inflammatory signals keep this same enzyme constantly active. Improving gut health, managing blood sugar consistently, and reducing visceral fat all lower inflammation and enzyme activity. As inflammation drops, the enzyme calms, cortisol activation decreases, and fat loss naturally begins to improve. The type of exercise you choose also matters far more than most people in fitness currently understand. Long, slow cardio performed daily actually increases cortisol over time and does not efficiently reduce visceral fat. Sprinting, on the other hand, powerfully reduces visceral fat, lowers inflammation, and does not chronically elevate cortisol. Think about how humans likely moved across earlier eras. Lots of walking, occasional sprinting, then genuine rest. Not grinding on a treadmill at moderate intensity for 60+ minutes every single day without recovery. Short, intense bursts of effort followed by real recovery is exactly what the human stress system handles best. The sauna is another underrated tool because it reduces inflammation, improves heart function, and supports better sleep. Maintaining adequate calories across the week is critical, and something aggressive dieters consistently and dangerously get wrong. Your body does not evaluate your intake one day at a time the way most diet plans suggest. It looks at energy availability across a longer window and adjusts fat storage hormones accordingly over time. You can have days with a real deficit. That is fine, and sometimes necessary for real progress. But you also need days at or above maintenance to signal safety and abundance to your body clearly. Looking at your weekly calorie average rather than obsessing over each individual day is a transformative habit entirely. Stable meal timing matters more than most people realize because blood sugar instability is a strong cortisol trigger. When blood sugar drops, suddenly cortisol spikes to mobilize energy. That is a core survival function always. Keeping meals at consistent times reduces those blood sugar dips and keeps cortisol rhythms more stable daily. Apple cider vinegar with meals is a simple, inexpensive tool that helps blunt post-meal glucose spikes meaningfully. Flatter blood sugar curves mean fewer cortisol activation events throughout the day, which compounds into better outcomes weekly. Creatine is another surprisingly helpful tool for cortisol management through a completely different and interesting mechanism altogether. When your body senses it, energy-depleted cortisol rises as part of a survival mobilization response always. Creatine helps maintain cellular energy availability, which signals to your body that resources are adequate and safe. If cortisol rises during intense training, having adequate creatine stores helps you recover from that stress efficiently. You become more resilient under pressure rather than more depleted, and that difference builds meaningfully over months. Now let us talk about exactly when and how to use dark chocolate so you actually get benefit. Do not eat dark chocolate right before bed. That is the single most important rule to follow always. Dark chocolate contains theobromine, which is a mild stimulant related to caffeine that noticeably increases alertness and flow. Theobromine is gentler than caffeine and will not give you a jolt, but it is still stimulating. Consuming it after 5 in the evening can genuinely impair sleep quality for people who are even slightly sensitive. And since better sleep is one of your primary tools for lowering the enzyme, disrupting it defeats everything. The ideal window is either late morning or early to mid-afternoon, somewhere after your lunch meal. Late morning works well because cortisol is still naturally elevated, and flavonols can actively inhibit the enzyme then. Early afternoon works well because cortisol begins its natural decline, and chocolate supports mood and mental clarity well. Either window gives you the enzymatic benefit and the neurological benefit without touching your nighttime sleep quality at all. The dose is not large, 1 to 1.5 ounces of high polyphenol dark chocolate daily. You do not need to eat half a bar. This is a small, precise, and strategic daily intervention only. Source your chocolate carefully, because not all dark chocolate contains meaningful levels of the polyphenols that matter here. Look for chocolate labeled high in polyphenols or minimally processed, and aim for at least 72% cocoa. Higher cocoa percentages generally mean more flavonols present. Yes, it is bitter, but your palate adjusts quickly. The bitterness is actually a signal that polyphenol content is high enough to be biologically meaningful today. Start at 72% and gradually work your way up to 85% or even higher. The real message underneath all of this is not that dark chocolate is magic or fixes everything alone. The real message is that your body is constantly reading signals about whether you are safe or threatened. Chronic restriction, poor sleep, overtraining, unstable blood sugar, and ongoing inflammation all send danger signals relentlessly inward. And your body responds to those danger signals by activating cortisol locally in fat tissue and holding tight. The path forward is not more restriction and more stress piled on top of an already stressed system. It is strategic signals of safety sent consistently and repeatedly to your body through simple daily choices made. Eat enough across the week, sleep deeply and consistently, sprint occasionally and reduce inflammation wherever you possibly can. Stabilize your blood sugar across the day and add 1 ounce of high polyphenol dark chocolate daily. These are not complicated interventions, they are not expensive, and they do not require a perfect lifestyle immediately. They are signals, and when your body receives enough of them consistently, It stops holding on so tightly. That stubborn belly fat, those disrupted nights, that mysterious morning glucose elevation, they all share one upstream driver. And now you understand exactly what that driver is, how it works, and what you can do today